Well, hello friends, and welcome to Ariel's Twilight Years, how to be a really old model. Today I am joined by my dear sister, Imogen Howson. Hello, Immi.
Hello, Jocelyn. Oh, I mean Ariel.
Everyone knows it's fine. Thank you for being on my YouTube channel. I like to think my sister is very similar to me, but when it comes to self-promotion, she is not especially similar to me.
I am not.
Do you remember many years ago, you'd come to see me in a Shakespeare play? We went out for lunch first, and I said, because we used to do plays together when we were children,
Yeah.
Would you like to be coming on stage as well tonight? And you said it would ruin my day.
Yeah, it totally would.
I find it fascinating because, as we were about to talk about, we have many things in common, and in many ways we were and are really compatible, but obviously there are some glaring, massive differences. So the reason I'm interviewing lovely Immi today is that my book is about to come out. Publication date is the 24th of August, and certainly the first part of my story and then quite a lot of the later parts of the book feature Immi, because we only have 4 years age difference between us, so she was my big sister and the person I kind of confided in all through my life, really. So I like the idea of showing people who read the book a little bit behind the scenes of the people I describe, especially because I know it's my story, so you're like supporting cast, and obviously you're not supporting cast, you're a whole person in your own right. So to begin with, please can you explain to people what your life is? What do you do these days?
I am a writer and an editor. I have 2 grown-up children who don't live with us anymore. I'm married to a Church of England vicar. When I'm not writing or editing, I bake, go for runs, walk my dogs, and do very enthusiastic but amateur art on my iPad.
So our lives have worked out very differently
Yes.
from each other. We don't get to see each other anywhere near as much as I would like. So here are some questions based on things that happen in my book. So to begin with, there's a line I wrote in my book. Whenever I read through it, I always think I really should ask Immi about this, so now I'm going to. So the line is, I've never dared ask whether Immi found my frequent desire to make our games a little bit more tragic a bit annoying, because we played a lot of imaginary games and my tastes were always towards the macabre, really.
Yes. I don't remember finding them annoying. I remember that sometimes the game seemed to take on its own life and go in a darker direction than we actually wanted it to. But I never felt that was particularly your fault. I always felt that was,
that's kind.
because I don't like darkness in my own life, but I have very dramatic instincts when it comes to storytelling. So I like big disasters that would happen with my toys. I don't think that was just your fault.
Oh, I'm glad, because I've always blamed myself somewhat. And I know sometimes if I played with the Cindy dolls when you weren't there, like terrible things used to happen. And I used to feel like you would not be pleased. And I'm glad that you do not feel like I traumatised you. We did have great games.
We did.
Now, of course, I realise I was really lucky because Immi was going to become a novelist, and even when we were children, you were writing stories and you were creating stories. So you created a lot of the games we played, and I entered into them with you, but you were in the driving seat.
They had great world building and characters, and I think where I used to rein you back was I wanted internal consistency, and you didn't so much care about internal consistency. You wanted your favourite character to have wonderful things happen to them, or you wanted terrible things to happen, and I only wanted those things to happen if they worked in the world of the game.
Yes. Well, that would make sense, because now you write stories where some bad things happen but they get resolved, and I make custom videos where sometimes dreadful things happen and people get away with awful things.
Yes. And you get eaten by sofas. I mean, that's not reasonable.
No. Thank you, dear Immi. Inevitably, what I describe in the early portions of my book is a very weird childhood, because we were growing up as Jehovah's Witnesses in the 1980s without a television and without access to pop music, which I now realise it kind of separated us from our peer group in a really dramatic way. And I'm aware that when I talk to people about my book, I often feel like I'm describing something that people feel sorry for me for. It's kind of them, but I don't like it very much. So I have found myself thinking about, but what were the good bits about it? Even if it wasn't pleasant, what are the positive things we have got out of the childhood that we had?
I mean, it's probably a cliche to say so, but I think actually the fact that we didn't have a television did mean we had to form our own entertainment. And I think that was good for us, because I think it did force us to, a whole day in the summer holidays where we couldn't watch television. We had to make up games that would be immersive enough to take us through the whole day. Also, I suppose that intensely, incredibly long, boring Jehovah's Witness meetings do force you to entertain yourself in your own head, which I don't know if that's good for you, but it's a skill that you learn.
It was one of my favourite things to write about, like the things we did to just keep ourselves entertained through meetings that were sometimes day long. I find that I do appreciate the strength of our imaginations, because obviously we both use that for making a living now. But one of the things that often occurs to me is the sense of freedom of choice that I have because of growing up in an environment where we had very little freedom. It feels quite intoxicating.
Oh goodness, yes, the contrasts. Yes, I'll never get used to, because I became a Christian after I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, and Christianity also has rules and doctrines, because Jehovah's Witnesses is quite similar to mainstream Christianity, but there's so much more freedom to believe in your own way.
Yes.
And that is lovely, because as a Jehovah's Witness, if you looked at the Bible and thought, I'm not sure the Bible is actually saying what the Jehovah's Witnesses says, you weren't allowed to believe that.
And you mustn't tell anyone.
No, and if you raised it with like an elder or a mentor, they would basically tell you were wrong and to stop believing that.
Yes.
Whereas as a Christian, you'll certainly meet Christians who will say that, but there are whole churches that are like, yeah, sure, that's what we believe.
Yes.
And so the breadth and freedom of mainstream religion has been really nice for me to move into.
Yes.
Fewer dress codes, because again, the dress codes, primarily for women, but also for men, with Jehovah's Witnesses, was so very strict. And after I left, I bought my first over-the-knee garment. It was a pair of shorts. It was the early 90s. It was very fashionable, I would like to tell you, to wear thick woolly black tights and then black kind of shapeless shorts that came down to about here.
I remember, yes.
And I bought myself some from Dorothy Perkins, and I wore them. And I was going on the bus to sixth form college, and I looked down and realised it was the first time I'd seen my knees in public since I'd been a teenager.
Oh gosh.
And I liked the look of my knees. It was wonderful to be able to go out and show your knees, and no one was going to take you aside and tell you that really wasn't appropriate and you needed to wear something better because Jehovah was very disappointed in you, or you were going to make all the brothers in the congregation sin. And I will never get over the freedom of being able to show my knees in public. And basically I have worn the shortest things I could find ever since, because I'm now 50, but that freedom it's huge.
The enjoyment I get from choosing my own clothes remains, again, intoxicating. I'm grateful for that, because we might as well feel some positive things as a result of what we went through, and the constant reminders of freedom, I don't think they will ever really leave me. Tell me, because I discuss it from my point of view in my book, and I know that your outward response was very different from mine when we were at school. What was being a Jehovah's Witness at school like for you?
It made everything 10 times harder. And being at school, certainly secondary school, where children become unkinder and where you become so much more self-conscious and life is just tougher. Children are so unkind to the people who don't fit in. And when the very doctrine that you're supposed to be living by is being in the world, not of it, so the whole point of you is supposed not to fit in, it's terrible, because all your instincts want to fit in, as a general rule, just to survive. You're being told that as a moral decision you need to stand out by your behaviour, by your language, by your clothes, by the fact you don't go to assembly, by the fact you don't go to birthday parties, you don't celebrate Christmas, you can't give Christmas cards, you're not allowed to help decorate the school for Christmas, you can't go to the Halloween party, you can't in fact go to any of the parties because parties are bad. It makes it so much harder than I think it was for my kids when they went to school, and I would let them have the slutty clothes if they wanted to wear the slutty clothes.
So that they could be like their peers?
Yeah. So they could fit in. You let them go to the disco. School is already tough, but being a Jehovah's Witness, because of the difference and because of the fact that it was a moral imperative narrative just made it this constant struggle.
I feel like it gave me this overpowering desire to be invisible, to be not noticed,
Yeah.
which is not natural to my character, of course. So I've grown out of it again. But for a long period, the best thing I could think of was to be invisible.
Background.
And I remember when we left and we were able to begin to achieve that, what a relief it was. So I feel the same as you, that if I had children, I would let them do anything. It'd be allowed to fully fit in with their peer group. It doesn't matter how unwise or frivolous it might seem. No.
Yeah,
like,
aside from outright danger, I kind of wanted them to do anything if they wanted to do it to fit in. I remember when we had our daughter, Philip, my husband and I were chatting about when she was older, when she was a teenager, and I made some joke about, well, probably in the future what will be fashionable is to go to school wearing a thong and tassels on your nipples. And Phil said, well, our daughter won't be doing that. And I said, our daughter will be doing that if that is the fashion. Yes, she will.
Yeah.
And actually when we came to it, we would both have let her, if that being the fashion.
You went through something, which I talk about in my book. You went through something horrible, and it led to us leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course, a lot of people who watch this video will not know what it is at this point, but in the future, once the book has come out, they will know. And I just thought it might be nice for them, those of them who are more empathetic, to know that everything turned out okay for you. I think it turned out okay.
Yes. Everything turned out beautifully for me, yes. The thing that led to us leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses, one of the things, was that I secretly had a boyfriend who was also a Jehovah's Witness.
This was banned by the Jehovah's Witnesses.
And this was entirely banned. You were not allowed to date until you were 18. It was an absolute strict rule. I was 15 at this point. And this was found out by an elder in the congregation, and the elders wanted to treat it in the strictest way possible. I think there was talk about a disciplinary meeting. They made the boyfriend break up with me, and I was dramatically devastated in the way only a 15-year-old can be. And I was genuinely very, very distressed, not just with the breakup, but the way that I felt that he had been forced to break up with me.
Yeah.
Because I would have been very offended and upset if I'd thought he had found me wanting and broken up with me. But it was worse that I kind of felt that maybe he didn't really want to, that he'd just been forced to, and he'd been forced to pretend that he did want to.
Yeah.
And I kind of felt, if I could separate him from that, then maybe he would decide he didn't want to break up with me. It was really horrible and traumatic, and eventually, because my parents were so angry and upset with the way the elders of the congregation dealt with it, we left that congregation, which led to us leaving the Jehovah's Witnesses entirely. But now, what I wanted at the time was to be allowed to date him and to carry on being a good Jehovah's Witness and to end up getting married to him. And that would have been terrible, because that would have made me stuck in the religion forever. Yeah. Because I cannot see how I would have been able to extricate myself from a marriage or a religion once I was married, and God forbid, children. If that route had happened, I would probably still be a Jehovah's Witness. I'm relatively intelligent. I can read the Bible myself. I think I would have become very unhappy with the doctrines at some point, because they're not logical and they're incredibly restrictive. And then if I'd had children as a Jehovah's Witness, and if one of them had turned out gay or trans, as my son has, we would have had to leave, because the Jehovah's Witnesses have absolutely no space for treating LGBTQ people kindly at all. I can imagine my life would have become just horrible, and I wouldn't have been able to show my knees in public. And as it was, we left. I went to a mainstream Christian church. I met my now husband a couple of years later. He is not mean and restrictive and belonging to a weird religion. I mean, your perspective may vary on that, because he is a Church of England priest, but it's not weird to me. And we were able to bring our children up in freedom and happiness and generally good things. And when I think how different my life could have been, it just horrifies me.
I think about the same thing, because I mean, both of us were quite kind of law-abiding. The idea of letting people down and disappointing them is very bad for us. Yeah. And so I sometimes wonder if I would have left of my own volition. I mean, I hope I would, but I am aware it could have been a very, very difficult, long journey. So, moving on from Jehovah's Witnessing, I want to talk about you making a reappearance a little later in the book. So I'm 16, and I've just discovered under traumatic circumstances that I must be into BDSM. Sadomasochism is the phrase I knew about. And I decided the only person in the world I could possibly even begin to tell would be you. So I wonder, do you remember that conversation?
I don't remember it well. I do remember saying the thing about C.S. Lewis, but I don't really remember the context very well. Because, as Joss explains in the book, I think, in an attempt to comfort her, that this sexual aberration didn't need to ruin her life, because I knew nothing about BDSM at that point, really. I sort of scoured my memory and remembered that in a C.S. Lewis biography I'd read, apparently he was a sadomasochist, and I don't think practiced it, but was just aware of it as probably he thought it was a kind of aberration in his character. And so I produced that and said, well, C.S. Lewis did all right, so you're probably not an evil person, because look, C.S. Lewis. And that's really all I remember.
Right.
I think I remember you possibly saying little things in passing at other points, because I remember...
Oh.
I think I remember you saying something about that, sadism, at one point. And I was a little freaked out, because I wasn't sure if it meant you were going to practice non-consensual sadism at some point in the future.
I did not.
I didn't think you were, but...
Wow.
And I can't remember how old you were, I can't remember how old I was. I think we were possibly both in our teens. And I thought, well, that can't be good. But then I thought you probably wouldn't act on that, which you didn't.
No. Wow, I wonder what I said. I don't remember that.
I can't remember. I just remember the frisson of discomfort. And you had obviously chewed your Cindy doll's foot off. So you did have precedent for being sadistic towards toys.
Yeah, wow. Given that you obviously don't feel like you said the best thing, even though actually you did, given the situation we were in, it was very comforting. What you said was very comforting. And I can't think of anything you would have been capable of saying at the time, given our background, that would have been any more helpful. So this is something I think about a lot. What would you say to someone in my position now if a 16-year-old came to you with the same issue?
Oh, well, now it would be so much easier.
Yeah.
That would be great. I mean, because I just say, okay, that's fine. That's really normal. There are loads of people, those are their sexual tastes. It's just like being gay. It's a sexuality. Don't worry about it. But if they had more concerns, if they were like, but what if it means I'm secretly a serial killer, then we talk at more depth. There are loads of people who are into the same kind of thing, who are into your particular kink. You can find them, you can have a relationship with them if that's what you want. Everything is fine. This is not an issue.
Yes.
Which would be nice. I wish I'd been able to say that to you. I didn't know that kinky people existed.
No, of course not. No, of course not. One of the themes in my book is being frightened of the world, being so frightened because of what we've been told about the horrible inclinations of the people around us. And one of the things I talk about in the book is my long paranoid list of prayers, the things I used to pray for because I was so frightened of all these things happening. Do you remember what you used to pray for?
Oh, yeah, I didn't have a terrible long list.
Okay.
I think I was scared of fewer things than you were.
Well done.
For some reason. Especially as a child, I had a very strict list of things I prayed for, and I felt very strongly that if I left any of them out, God would see that as a loophole.
Oh my gosh,
so I had to...
there's a tid just got.
Mine was, please don't let me have any bad dreams, please don't let any spiders come in the night, and please don't let murderers break into the house. I think for a while I added, please don't let there be a twister. What's it called?
A cyclone.
A cyclone. Please don't let there be a cyclone.
Why on earth would...
I went through a period of thinking that was very likely, and eventually it worried me so much I got up in the night and went downstairs and said to our parents, how likely is it that a cyclone might come? And they said, not likely at all, that doesn't happen in this country. And I went up to bed again, very reassured, and going back to just praying about murderous spiders and bad dreams.
Yes, which is still bad, but nowhere near as bad.
Oh, and I think at some point I probably added demons, because I was very scared of demons.
Demons. Yes.
That was my big fear. I wasn't particularly scared of, the evil people, although I know there were many, many evil people. And I knew that as we got nearer to Armageddon, there would be more evil people. And that was very scary. But I was terrified of Satan and demons, who I was taught and I very much believed were just kind of there waiting to get you.
Yeah, like either get you or get into you.
Or possess you.
Yeah. We were given the impression that this was very likely. I mean...
And very common.
Very common. Yeah. It was really awful doctrine.
And the things we had to avoid many things because they were sinful, or pagan, or to do with the Church of England, or immoral. But we had to avoid a lot of things if they were potentially to do with the occult. So Ouija boards, which I'm still freaked out by. and would never touch.
I had to have one for a custom video, and I really didn't like having it in the house.
Yeah, and still, just in case, I would always steer clear of them.
Yeah.
But Ouija boards, reading your horoscope in magazines.
Oh, yes.
Having your fortune told. I mean, reading books about the occult, watching horror movies, anything. Or watching Scooby-Doo, Dungeons and Dragons, which I didn't even know what that was.
The first thing we knew was that it was bad.
So evil. Because it was about Dungeons and Dragons, which were probably demons. And I strongly believed that any of these things would be like the gateway for a demon to kind of latch onto you. And it was never really explained what the demons would do, but just the fact that they are so scary in themselves, they might appear. I cannot explain the terror that I felt about the idea a demon might appear in the bathroom when I was brushing my teeth.
Yeah.
That was a huge terror throughout my childhood and my teenage years, and has never left me.
No, I feel like it's still to some extent with you.
Yeah.
And it didn't affect me so deeply. The thing, as we've talked about before, the thing for me is the idea of being bad, because the Jehovah's Witnesses kept people so insecure about their salvation that I sort of hung on to that, and I can't get rid of the idea that maybe I have done something bad enough that I'm not acceptable. And they're quite different.
They are, and it's weird because we're 4 years apart, so we basically have the same upbringing at the same time.
Yeah.
We went to the same meetings, we read the same Jehovah's Witness literature, we were brought up by the same parents, obviously, and yet the paranoias that you collected are very different from the paranoias I collected, but we both collected.
Yeah, and it's one of the
distressing set of them.
It makes me so angry about cults is that the hangover from it will be different based on you as an individual, but it's always there. The trauma, the damage is always there.
Yeah.
And that makes me very angry when I consider the fact that the people who made up that religion cannot possibly have believed it because they made it up. You are one of the heroes of my book because of something that happens kind of in the middle of the story. I have a great disaster, and you come and rescue me in a big dramatic fashion. And I wondered, have you ever stopped feeling like you might be called upon to do that again? How does it feel being a big sister, like for adults?
I don't particularly feel that I'm likely to be called on. Not as a kind of thing in the back of my mind the whole time. I obviously would be available to be called on if you had a big disaster. But I think you would be available if I had a big disaster.
Certainly, yes. I feel like I've got a lot of making up to do.
I don't feel that. But I feel if some disaster happened and it couldn't be fixed in my nuclear family, you would be the first person I'd call to say, okay,
obviously, you should.
I don't think the big sister thing makes me feel massively responsible now you're an adult. And I don't particularly feel that towards my children either, now they're adults doing their own thing.
Oh, good.
I'm definitely available.
Of course.
But I don't feel like I need to be on call.
That is interesting, because when I think about how you used to kind of mother all our cuddly toys and dolls, I thought it might be something you could never let go of, and I'm sort of glad that you can, to some extent. I think it's good for you.
It turns out I can once people are properly grown up and happy. And then I'm like, oh, okay, my job is done. When they're in distress or when they're small, then I can't turn the motheringness off.
No. Do you recognise yourself in my portrayal of you? Does it feel right?
Yes, it does, yeah. I think you very good characterisation.
Thank you. And do you like yourself in it?
Yes.
Good. Good. I hope
I think I'm much calmer and more heroic than I really am, so I like it. Yes, I think I come across very well in your book. I like that.
What is your favourite bit of the book?
There are some bits that are really good and dramatic, but they're a little tough to read because I also lived them quite often, or you lived them, and I feel sad that you had to. My favourite part of the book is when you're describing our utterly peculiar childhood and the way we dealt with it.
Oh, I'm glad, because it's ours. I mean, that's our story.
And we did have such a strange childhood in so many ways. But I think we were wonderfully eccentric and creative. And it charms me to remember the ways we found to entertain ourselves and the games we played and the slightly subversive nature of some of our games.
Yeah.
I don't think we necessarily meant them to be subversive.
No,
but the fact that we played Witch Boarding School and we used the Jehovah's Witness books that we had, because they were really nice. We had various different books and they were the same size, but they were all different colours. One was pink. And they lived on our bookcase in a place of honour. And they were the perfect size and colour for spell books. Which, if the Jehovah's Witnesses had known we were pretending that they were spell books for Witch School, they would have been appalled.
We'd have been in, like, proper trouble. I didn't remember that.
And I don't think we meant to be subversive.
No.
But we just innocently were. And I think that's quite charming.
I've just remembered that our dolls were Jehovah's Witnesses. Of course.
And
All them.
They had to go to the meetings.
Yeah, of course they did. What bit of my book was the hardest bit for you to read? I think I know the answer.
The bit where we all went out to do door-to-door work and Daddy suddenly made us all go home and said any longer, and then you sent that bit to me to read because I think it was a bit
recent,
that you wrote more
yeah, my
recently.
editor asked for more, yeah.
And you sent it to me, and I knew, because I'd seen an extract that you put on Twitter.
Yeah.
And I knew it would be very funny. I also knew, I think, that I would find it really difficult to read. And I remember sort of putting it off until I'd done my work
I'm
for
so
the day.
sorry.
No, you were right to send it to me. It was very well written, and it was very good. But it was horribly evocative because I remembered, because I was 15 at that point, so it's like in my adult memory, it's not in my child memory.
Yeah.
I remember it really clearly, and it was horrible, and that was tough to read.
I see that. I thought you were going to say some of the BDSM, so I'm glad.
Oh,
I mean,
no.
Ideally, none of it would be traumatic for you.
I skim the BDSM. Yeah. I tend to skim sex scenes in books, and it falls into that. Sorry.
Wow.
You know, I read it, but I don't read it with huge attention.
No, I understand. This is my last question now, you'll be very glad to know. So I am aware that I basically followed my big sister very annoyingly, like I did when I was a child, into her field. So she is multiply published already, and now I am following her, trailing behind like a nuisance. But I am very aware that you are an actual proper writer, and I was never more aware of this than when my editor was editing my work and took out all my semicolons, or almost all of them, and replaced them with M-dashes, which I did not know about. So I want to ask you, when do you use a semicolon? Because now I'm scared of them.
A semicolon is generally only ever used to link two bits of a sentence that are also complete sentences in themselves.
Okay.
So if you have a sentence and there's a semicolon in the middle, and you can replace that with a full stop and then a new sentence, that's correct.
Thank you.
If you can replace it correctly with a comma, then it shouldn't be a semicolon, because a comma separates two things that are not complete sentences in themselves. An M-dash, charmingly, can be used in place of just about any punctuation. The theory is that a semicolon is a more obtrusive piece of punctuation, so it kind of makes you go, oh, semicolon, stop. Whereas an M-dash is a little bit more sort of stream of consciousness, you flow through the sentence more easily. That's the theory. I don't really agree, because I think an M-dash is quite big, whereas a semicolon is a bit more invisible, but that's the editing theory.
Thank you. And so if I do ever write another book, I am going to ask you many more questions about it, because the idea that my poor editor had to change possibly 1,000 of these things, I was so embarrassed, and now I realise if I write something in the future, I do not want that to happen.
It might not have been that you were using them incorrectly, it might have been house practice to use as few semicolons as possible.
I like that idea.
And if it's house style, then she might have done a global find and replace, which would not have been lots of work.
I've been trying to work it out because, you know, a few have been left. So I look at them and think, okay, why is that one allowed? So thank you. Thank you very much for joining me. I know you do not like to be on camera as much as I do, but I really feel like it will be very nice for people to have seen you, because you are one of the favourite bits of my book, because I love my sister very much and I want you to love her too. So thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, as always, for joining me. Link for the book is below. Please like, subscribe. I say this because YouTubers are meant to say that, and I don't think anyone ever really listens. Thank you, as always, and I'll be back next month. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Goodbye now. Goodbye. Thank you.